Okay, so I want to spend a little bit more time talking about this question of otherness and some of the discussion that was going on, I think, at the Wholeness Network about shedding of otherness, or I think some kind of an appeal to an ultimate unity or a realization of all being one, or ultimately perhaps even becoming one. I want to argue, as I said before, really against this idea. I think that from from my own perspective, and this comes largely informed from people like Kenneth Burke and the Stoics, and from Becker, certainly Hans Jonas, otherization is perhaps the key principle. That otherization is one of the marks of human life, and that we really don't become ourselves except by being otherized. That otherization is one of the perhaps key elements of humanity, and some others that we'll never get rid of. The simple other would be death. Death will always be the other. I'm fearful of those people who want to promote a unity of everything to such a degree that death will no longer be the radical other. Those to me start to be somewhat fearful doctrines of. I know a lot of people like to talk about the singularity and this possibility of artificial life and neural net downloads and I guess life eternal through virtual space or something. I myself will not be among those people. I'm going to choose to die. Yes, please, for me. I want no part of the life forever in the virtual reality. I think there are other forms of otherization, though, rather than this just sort of radical blanket fact of it. Language itself is a diversity of kinds of opposition and otherness, and a universal language where everyone speaks the same language, to me, would be a horrifying thing. We need to celebrate cultural differences. It's good to have tolerance for diversity. And we say it that way. People say, well, we need to have more tolerance. But there's a different way to say we need to have the maturity to nurture and to accept differences as as a forcing bed of good. It really is important to, I think, to open to otherness with a non-clinging to one's own ego or a non-attachment to one's own identity. I think part of the task is to have a non-attachment to life's diversity, to participate in it, to have meaningful orientations, but to recognize that as best that you can, focusing on the things that you want to do, to realize that in many levels, it's always an ambiguous dance. It's an ambiguous dance of one and many. It's never just all one, but it's never just all many. It's both one and many. It's never just self and other. It's never, the others all that there is and they liquidate my being, but nor do I just lord over the other. Nor, the others aren't just objects in my world. We could try to do that. When Sartre talks about the difference between sadism and masochism, there are kind of two modes of life that some people try to maybe conform the general patterns of their lives to these styles of being either sadistic or masochistic. The sadist says, I am the looker who is unseen, and other people are simply objects in my world. I'm a sun, and they're but satellites. There are other people who just see themselves as objects in the world. They are there to be hailed by others. They're things amidst the other things, and they recognize themselves as positioned by others, and they become very masochistic, right? They're the unlooking looked at, the seen but unseen. I think all of these examples of otherization, it's important to see, right, that we want a kind of spiritual understanding of unity, right? I think that there's something about that logic that's important. But there's just as much something important about the spiritual logic of diversity, of difference, of opposition, and of mystery, of an ambiguous dance of bringing together and taking apart. Life is an ambiguous dance of things merging and then dividing, whether it's at the level of babies being born or people dying, or the level of eating and defecating, whether it's breathing, whether it's the arbitrary lines of private property that say this is mine, not yours, and these kind of dividing lines. We continuously merge and divide various substances. When even when I talk about this as a pen or as a tool or as an object or as an illustration within an argument, at each time its identity is contingent upon how the language allows it to merge with some things but means divide from other things. Language is a merger and division, self and other, all of these lines, the lines that allow me to separate my voice from the volume of my voice, from the language that my voice is in. All of these are, they're dynamic ebbs and flows of differences amidst similarities. I think it's a task to help people become non-ego identified observers of thought, and to watch the ebb and flow of merger and division, of bringing together and taking apart. And it's an ambiguous dance, but I think the task is to see, how do you say it, that I don't think that it liquidates moral intention. I think one can still have a sense of compassion, a sense of minimal expectations, and doing good around you, and not because there's some reward to be had afterward. It's because it feels good to give back to the world. When you get up and you see it's a beautiful day out, or even if it's a crappy day, when you see a sky that's filled with clouds and you watch the way the trees move and the birds sing, and there's just so many things to be thankful for. When I think of David K. Reynolds' work, and where he says, I've never met a neurotic filled with gratitude, that there's something about neurosis which is anti-gratitude. I think people can't realize that their very breath is a gift. Who said they deserved to drink water and to feel a cool breeze? I mean, the simplest little things compared to nothing seem absolutely magical. It's hard to bring the adequate framework to compare what life's little simple joys. It's so tragic that life's little simple joys can't be enough for so many people. I think what we need is a unity of diversity. It's a unity of intended consciousnesses observing the dance of merger and division, and with a kind of a love and compassion toward what is obviously a cosmos that loves variety and diversity and oppositional forces, to somehow see that as the forever dance of the heavens and of the world. And I don't mean some super fantastical after this world. I just mean when you look up in the sky, it has a radiance and a beauty that has a majesty that's a kind of otherness. But it's uplifting, but also, I guess, simultaneously it sets us apart, and we say, oh wow, it's overwhelming. A storm can have that sense. A storm just comes down on you. We feel the otherness of nature. I think the task is to ask, in open honesty, can we have the courage? Can we have the courage to see that we are ultimately connected with everything, but we will die? Each of us are individuals that are completely isolated, and we live private lives, and we will die, and we feel obligated to make something of ourselves and to give something back to the world, because it's something that we're not. We can't give directly to ourselves. We give to the other, perhaps even to anonymous others, to others who we'll never even meet. But I think there is just as much truth in the recognition that we are all places and moments of a self-aware cosmos, and not the things are self-aware, but it took all of this materiality in order to prepare the room for something like a self-conscious being who could reflect upon such a totality. At any rate, those are some thoughts about otherization and whole. I think it really is an ambiguous dance of merger and division. Check out Kenneth Burke's. I'll see if I can post his Dialectician's hymn there in the underbar. Okay, thanks.